Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Tech.Sam, and we're currently still on our 100 days of DevOps. If you're seeing this video for the first time, we started 100 days of DevOps, and today we are in day 44. Started with day one, where we're covering DevOps from beginner level to some advanced concepts. Where we started with the fundamentals. We have to do with Linux. We talked about file system, shell scripting, and all of that. Then we talked about networking and all of that fundamentals, and we moved to the second phase, which is containerization. We looked extensively at Docker. We looked at Docker build, Docker command, Docker architecture, and even Docker compose, where you can run multi containers, at once. We've done projects. I think we've done about 2 or 3 projects where which you can check the playlist. Replicate these projects and modify it, also improve and better yourself and all of that. So now we've we are in the third phase. We started the third phase about a week ago or thereabouts, and which is CI/CD. CI/CD is the core of DevOps. DevOps revolves around CI/CD because that is where a lot of automation takes place. And we've talked extensively on what CI/CD means, the different process of CI, and then what CD does. We looked at tools that can be used for CI/CD, where we said we're going to talk majorly or look at just 3 of those tools. We talked about looking at Jenkins, GitHub Actions, and Argo CD. So this third phase is only for the CI. I mentioned it on the first day. We'll have another phase for the CD. So we are only going to consider 2 tools for the CI because Argo CD is specifically for continuous delivery. So that will be in the phase of CD. So for the 2 tools for CI, we finished with Jenkins yesterday. So we're able to, the project that we've been doing since the Docker period, we've, been able to do a CI process for it using Jenkins. And we are going to do the same thing with GitHub Actions. I picked 2 of the most popular CI tools. Yes, they can be used both for CI and CD, but they work better as a CI tool. Yes. So we finished with Jenkins yesterday. You can check out the Jenkins videos, and you will be able to definitely learn 1 or 2 things from the videos. I know that there might be some things that I have not covered. If there's anything in Jenkins that you still want me to cover, you can also do a comment on. You can also leave a comment in the comment section. I will look at it and probably make a separate video for that because I might not be able to actually cover all. So that is why your feedback is actually very, very important. So if you're yet to like my videos, if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, if you're yet to turn on your notification bell, please kindly do so that when I, post more videos, you can actually get them firsthand and you can add to your knowledge. So right onto the business of today, we are going to look at GitHub Actions. So basically, what is GitHub Actions? GitHub Actions is also a CI tool just like Jenkins, right? So the difference between GitHub Actions and Jenkins is basically just the concept. It's just like when you have like a cloud platform, right? The concept of the same thing you can do on Azure, the same thing you can do on AWS, the same thing you can do on GCP and all of that. The concept remains the same. It's just the means to which you implement it might just be different. Same thing with an operating system. If you are using it like Linux, Linux has different flavors. We have Red Hat, we have Ubuntu, we have Fedora, we have Arch Linux. They all have the same concept, just a little different. So it's similar thing with GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions, Jenkins, they do the same thing, but their interfaces is different and the way they are used is different. But I really, really like GitHub Actions in the sense that GitHub Actions makes it very, very easy for us to actually work with it because a lot of um a lot of organizations they store their code base in um in GitHub. Yes, the repository is always in GitHub, and most times using a third-party application like Jenkins, you have to start in if you've watched the Jenkins videos, you would notice that we have to start installing some plugins. We had to start like yesterday now we had to set up a webhook just to integrate Jenkins with GitHub for us to achieve automation and all of that. So I want to believe that that was the reason why GitHub sat down and they were like, okay, instead of having third party always trying to work with us and then making things a little bit complex, because I'm not even going to lie to you, Jenkins is very good, but it can be complex, right? We'll still look at the difference between GitHub Actions and Jenkins. We won't be touching the terminal today like we did that first day. Concept first, then before we start, writing things, because you don't just want to start writing if you don't really understand how it works. So I'm not going to bore you with unnecessary talk. I'm just going to go straight to the point, tell you the difference, and then maybe from tomorrow we'll start, working on one or two things. So I believe, as I was saying, instead of integrating third party where you have to start installing plugins and all of that and whatnot and what such, you can just have your own how will I say it now? Your own CI tool that lives in GitHub itself. That way, you don't need any external plugins. You don't need, and that is not to say GitHub Actions does not have plugins, but the plugins of GitHub Actions, it's not to incorporate with external applications. It's the plugins that we have is to make writing of the code is even easier. So we just have something that is native. It's good to have something that is native to GitHub itself. So GitHub Actions is majorly developed for GitHub. The advantage is that you don't have to, start setting up anything. You are not setting up anything with GitHub Actions. That's why most DevOps engineers, now they like to work with GitHub, especially if your repository is on GitHub. Use GitHub Actions. That is the advantage. The disadvantage is that tools like GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, they are native to that platform. That means GitHub Actions will only work on GitHub. GitLab CI will only work on, GitLab, but they can't work. GitHub Actions cannot work with a repository on GitLab CI. I'm not sure it will work effectively. And that is where tools like Jenkins come into play. And that's why up till today, in the first day we're talking about CI/CD, I mentioned that I prefer GitHub Actions. However, I was still going to cover Jenkins first, because as a DevOps engineer, you also need to be able to work with Jenkins, because Jenkins can be integrated with any, version control system. You can use Jenkins um, with GitHub, you can use Jenkins with GitLab and all of that. So Jenkins is universal to, all repositories, all version control system, while GitHub Actions is just, specific to um, GitHub. Yes, it's similar to Terraform and Cloud Foundation, and what's the one for Azure? I've forgotten Azure Biceps and all of that. So it's just when we get to that stage, we would also talk about that. I don't want to put the the cart before the horse. So let's go straight to GitHub Actions. So how do we work with GitHub Actions? Does GitHub Actions have a UI? Does it have like a platform, a website? GitHub Actions actually lives on GitHub itself, on your repository. And how do you locate it? You see, I'm here in my repository. You see actions. So once you click on actions, this is actually where you find GitHub Actions. So you see, get started with GitHub Actions, build, test, and deploy your code, blah, 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 and all of that. And one thing I really love about GitHub Actions is that they have some code base out of the box. You know, you most times you will not even might not even need to write a code from scratch. They already have um they already have the the YAML. Okay, GitHub Actions is written in YAML format. Jenkins is Groovy, while GitHub Actions is YAML, and I have a video on YAML, and I explained what YAML is, how to write the YAML file. So yes, if you are very good with YAML, you are definitely going to enjoy working with GitHub Actions. Yes. So now we have GitHub Actions has its own um you know will I call it code snippet, where you can just click on any one and then just use it. You can just configure it like that out of the box. So this is how GitHub Actions looks like. Um, there's nothing configured here, so it definitely is going to be blank, it's going to be plain, and all of that. So working with GitHub Actions, there are two things you need to um be familiar with. Just like Jenkins, where you have a Jenkins documentation, GitHub Actions also has the GitHub Actions documentation page. Then they also have the GitHub Actions marketplace. So we can do GitHub Actions documentation. So you can come here. So this is an overview of the documentation. Then you can go to writing workflows. You can see workflow syntax and all of that. So you can come here, getting started, understanding GitHub Actions, um, concepts, workflows, and actions, and blah blah blah, and all of that, runners and stuff. So I'll quickly there's some concepts I would like to introduce us to in GitHub Actions. But I wouldn't want to should I do it here or because I want to just put them side by side with Jenkins so as to show you that they're literally one and the same. The concept is the same. It's just maybe the name that is different. So okay, let me go to GitHub Marketplace, GitHub Actions Marketplace. Okay, so now this marketplace, um, okay, while your GitHub Actions documentation basically it's self-explanatory, your documentation is for if you have anything you want to know about, if you want to know read further about GitHub and all of that. That's what the documentation page is for. It basically answers any questions you would want to ask about a particular tool. However, there's this interesting thing called a marketplace. What is a marketplace? Marketplace are basically let's say for example now I write a code or a workflow. Yes, let me just use workflow. Let's say I write a workflow that builds Docker image. Basically, that workflow just builds Docker image, and then you notice that okay, most times you want to build Docker image. So instead of everybody writing the same step over and over and over again, why don't we just have like a plugin where you can just use that particular plugin? Once you type that in your workflow, you are basically you've saved yourself the stress of building the Docker image. What do I mean? Now, the first thing you want to do when you want to write a pipeline in Jenkins, what was the first thing we did? First thing we did was we did the checkout. We checked out the code from our source code management. So the same thing applies to GitHub Actions. You can see the checkout. This enables us to check out the code basically. Yes. So how do we use that? You can see uses. This is the main thing here. Uses this is the what mainly you just write this. This is equivalent to writing the git. What did we write then? Sef? We wrote git branch, yeah, git branch, then URL and dash for Jenkins. So this is equivalent to writing it. So you can see that with GitHub Actions, you're writing less code and then you're still doing the same thing. And these are the additions that you can actually, put with it. You can do whatever you want to do with it. So this is what the marketplace is basically for. We can go back and let's say you want to build Docker image. There should be a plugin for that. Okay, so you can see build and push Docker image. This is basically it here. So when I click on it, you'll see how to build and push Docker image with build X. So you can see it here. This is the code. This is like a snippet of code that you can just use. So there with GitHub Actions, you don't really need to write your code from scratch. Whatever you can possibly think of, someone somewhere would have written it. and then publish it in the marketplace, and then all you need to do is just go and pick it up. That is one fantastic advantage of GitHub Actions. There's almost like, if you're going to write from scratch, it will just maybe little, or maybe you don't want to work with the plugins, right? Though for this part of our journey, we won't be using plugins because we'll write from scratch and all of that. We'll still be borrowing one or two things because we will still need to keep referencing all of this to make sure that we have the perfect pipeline. So yes, that is what these are two things that you need to be familiar with: the marketplace and documentation. It's going to help you um, write effective pipelines rather. So if there are two things you need to take home today, is the fact that when you're working with GitHub as a beginner or as a fresher, even some advanced people still reference documentation pages and marketplace. So these are two places you need to be conversant with, you need to be familiar with, and you know your way around. So let me go to my slide. So now there are some things, there are some concepts that you need to actually be familiar with. I'm not going to talk about them in isolation. I'm going to talk about them, you know, hand in hand with Jenkins, so that you can see that the concept is the same. The difference is just the naming convention, right? So the first concept that I would want to introduce us to is workflow. Workflow is similar to Jenkins file. I mentioned that Jenkins file is the file that you name your Jenkins pipeline. This is what Jenkins work with. For GitHub Actions work with workflow. Now, you don't write it like this. When you want to write a workflow, um, when you want to write a workflow, you you write it like this. You have a .github, then this is a file. You create a file, you create a folder called .github, and in that folder you create another folder so called workflows. Yes. So while Jenkins file is a file, workflow is literally like a folder where you now have different workflows, and they are written in YAML, right? So workflow defines your steps. It's a folder or a file that contains your build steps of your CI, right? That is workflow. Now, job in Jenkins is still basically job in GitHub Actions. A job is the steps that you need to run to actualize something like your build job. Now it will have its steps. In Jenkins we have building, you have your build, your build step, no, your build stage. Yes, I think, yes, you have your build stage, and you have the steps, you understand, for you to be able to actualize that. So it's the same thing with job. Job contains those steps. Yeah, job contains those steps, yes, that you use to achieve something. So that is for jobs. Now, another thing you need to be familiar with is runner. Basically, what a runner is similar to agent in Jenkins. Remember, when we were writing our pipeline, after we wrote the pipeline, the first thing we defined was agents, where we wrote agents and any. That means any available agent, Jenkins will use it. So it's the same thing as a runner. A runner basically, an agent is basically just a a um a virtual machine, or maybe a container, as the case may be, that runs your job, runs your pipeline, or runs your workflow, right? So it is the same thing. So you can have, for this runner, you can have a Linux runner, you can have a Windows runner, you can have a Mac OS runner. So those are the runners available for GitHub Actions. That is, so, okay, so you can see the explanation here, the machine that runs your command, right? So stages are like the job steps. It's basically the same thing. Credentials are stored in, we go to manage Jenkins, then we go to credentials, then we store our credentials and blah 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 for Jenkins. So For GitHub Actions, you basically store your credentials in secret or environment. So what do I mean by secret environment? When you come to settings of your repository, you can see environments, right? You can see, no, sorry, you can see environment or secret. Yes. So you can create a new environment and look, there should be secret here. Okay, sorry. So secret, then you come to actions. So this is where you store your secrets for GitHub Actions. So you can either store secrets or you can store variables, right? So if you want to if you want to add a variable in which your GitHub workflow would use, you come here, you add it, manage environmental variable, you add it. And if you want to use secret, you also choose secrets and then you click on manage environmental secrets. So this is where you add. It's as simple as that. You don't have to start, trying to configure one global thing and all of that and blah blah blah. So you just quickly come here, input it there, and whatever secret you put here can be read from your you know your workflow. So what else do we have? Okay, now for your webhook. So webhook, I explained yesterday. It's good we talked about webhook yesterday. Webhook basically, it sends a trigger from one application to another application. That means, basically making two applications work together to achieve a common thing. So for GitHub Actions, we do not need a webhook because GitHub Actions is on GitHub itself. So there's no external thing that you need a webhook for. All you need to do is just put an indicator. That indicator is like a trigger. So you can have the trigger on push, or you can have the trigger on pull request. You can specify the branch and all of that. So that's the difference. So you can see that the concepts are basically the same thing. It is just a naming convention that is different. So I don't really need to, start explaining so much about GitHub Actions because I've already done all of that while, explaining Jenkins and even introduction to CI and CD. This is just to, is like an overview or an introduction to um, GitHub Actions. So I don't think I've left anything out today. Today is just basically a introduction to GitHub Actions and just an overview, and just to state a fact that there is no it's not like you're learning a new thing with GitHub Actions. It is the same concept. The only thing is the names. The only thing is the names. If we decide to say, okay, let's look at GitLab CI. If I should bring out GitLab CI also, you will discover that the concept is still the same thing. It might just be the names that are actually different. So I hope we've been able to, get this clear and digest it. Like I said, we are not touching any terminal, we're not writing anything today. The writings will start from tomorrow, which is day 45. Yes. So once again, I hope we've been able to learn one or two things. If you've been enjoying my videos so far, please, I would implore you to once again subscribe to my channel. Turn on your notification bell because that is even more important. So when I post new videos, you get it. And if you know anybody who is interested in learning DevOps and looking for the proper roadmap and also guidance, you can always refer them to this particular channel, this particular playlist. We are not only going to be doing talking about DevOps. This channel is really going to be broad. I'll be looking at other things. We'll be looking at cloud, we'll be looking at cybersecurity, and all other good stuff. We have it in store for each and every one of us. So I'll see you again tomorrow where we'll start the main thing. We're basically going to be taking it exactly the same way we did for Jenkins. We'll take it step by step. So enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.